Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming back here after getting free food. So my name is Leo, and I'm going to be talking about engineering talent. The title of my talk is Debugging the Hiring Process for Both Sides of the Equation. So let's start with the motivation, I guess. So why am I doing this talk? Like many of us here, I've been on both sides of the sort of interviewing table. I also work for an ATS company, so an applicant tracking system, and that kind of gives me a little bit of exposure as well. And I just wanted to share some insights on and my experience that I learned over the years. So why is this important right now? I think that we've seen, especially on the keynote and the opening presentation from the sponsors, that there's a lot of interest in talent. And recently as well, I've seen in RTP there was a segment that Portugal is the third country struggling the most across the world, apparently, to find good talent, especially in technology. And I thought that was quite shocking. I mean, we're all talking about, like not finding good enough engineers. And to say that Portugal is struggling so much, I thought was somewhat surprising. So I decided to, start a conversation about it. The other thing as well is, as we've heard here, AI is really shifting the way working happens for us. So like our jobs, some people think it's coming for our jobs, some people think it's coming to help us do our jobs. And I think it's important to know a little bit more about the recruitment process as well. And lastly, the economy has been changing a lot over the last few years. And with that, I think companies have to be, more and more confident and efficient in the way they're hiring people. So they need to use their time and their money wisely. So I want to kind of try and touch a little bit on that as well. Who is this talk for? So I am not a hiring expert. I just happen to have a little bit of exposure to the industry and to that side of the industry. So if you work in HR or if you have a lot of experience in hiring, chances are you know more than me. So I'm sorry if I'm talking about things that seem obvious, but this talk is for anyone that is interested in the hiring process, whether you're looking to hire someone or looking to be hired. And eventually we all look for a job. So I feel like this probably will be useful to you. Next, what do I hope to achieve? This is not going to be a comprehensive guide to everything you need to know, but it's more of a looking at common hiring shortfalls and things that we can do and change, both as a candidate and as a company, to try and just improve and make the hiring process a little bit smoother. And lastly, what can we do after the talk? So if you've been a part of Geek Sessions for a long time, you probably know that we have a really cool Discord server. I'd be very happy to continue this conversation there, but also, if you come and find me after the talk and just ask any questions or share some of your experiences as well, I'd be very, very happy. Because I feel like we don't talk about interviews enough in a positive way. A lot of times we just dread the interview process, and I feel like that's not very healthy. So yeah, who am I? My name is Leo, as previously alluded. I'm a non-binary person. I was born in Brazil. I lived in the UK, more specifically in the island of Jersey, if you know where that is, for 12 years. And I've been living in Portugal since October 2021. I really like TypeScript, is my favorite language, I would say, probably, and functional programming. And I'm a senior full-stack engineer at Pinpoint. And Pinpoint, as I said, is an applicant tracking system that specializes in helping companies who manage multiple types of hiring. So that's, I guess, how some of my experience with this comes into play. But anyway, let's get started. So first of all, let's look at some bugs that we find in the recruitment process. Starting with the most basic one, can't find good candidates. So steps to reproduce. Open a new job position. Wait for candidates to apply. Notice that no one's a good fit. Propose fixes. So have a clear job description. I think it goes a long way to think about exactly what that position entails. A bit of an anecdote. So I work with Ruby on Rails, and in my previous job, not in this company, I think it would be a bit ironic if it was this one, but in a previous job, I had a railway engineer apply for a senior Ruby on Rails position. It was a really awkward rejection email to write because they had extensive experience in completely the wrong area, but it happens, right? The other proposed fix is motivate your employees to refer candidates. This usually means that the people they will refer is people that they would get along well with. Otherwise, I guess they shouldn't. There is the side of bias, though. So if people are referring candidates to your company, you should kind of pay attention to not hire them simply because someone has appointed that person. You should still assess them, on their ability and their fit with the company. Use targeted job boards that match your company culture. So if your company hires exclusively remote or exclusively on-site, there's job boards that will work better for each kind of profile. Try and find what job boards will have the candidates that mostly align with the way your company work before you post job ads in these job boards. Because that way you probably save some money and you also get candidates that, are just better. And the other thing is engage with these potential candidates, in the community through social media, but also through events like this. Like I think, how Omnibees did the talk at the beginning, they're always looking for people. It's very good for them and all the sponsors really to put their names behind conferences like this because it just shows the developers that they care. And lastly, offer competitive compensation and benefits. And this one might feel like a no-brainer, but I think that it's something that you can try to play with as well. Obviously, you can offer someone a lot of money, and it's more likely that they'll take the job. But you can also offer them benefits that align with the place where you are or perhaps the kind of company that you are. So if in your industry, maybe sometimes you could offer benefits that are easier for you to acquire and perhaps more cost-effective than just giving people money. And benefits go a long way, so consider that. The next bug is candidates feel uninterested and do not engage with the job posting. This one, I feel like perhaps it doesn't need saying, but I kind of wanted to add it for comedic purposes and also so you can roll your eyes, I don't know. Add generic statements to your job posting such as, you want someone that's good at working independently as a member of a team. Sure, you offer a competitive salary, whatever that might mean, or we're a family. Just don't say these things. As I said, use clear and concise communication. Be transparent about your company culture. So different people like to work in different ways. If you prefer people that have a lot of empathy, perhaps because of the industry that you work on, if you need people that are more pragmatic and down to business, try and highlight that when you're creating your job postings. That will make sure that you're attracting the right kind of people. Highlight company values. So again, right, what is important for you? Obviously, problem solving for engineers, I guess, is just a must-have. But having empathy or having flexibility or knowing how to talk to clients or knowing, having deep, extensive knowledge of perhaps mathematics and scientific concepts, all of those things may or may not be necessary. Try and show that to people that are applying for the job so that they know what they're coming into. And lastly, show the candidates that you have put effort into the job posting. So a lot of people make hiring as just like a need, something that they need to do. It's a chore. It's not something that they enjoy. I feel like if you put a little bit more effort, it kind of makes it easier for you in the long term because you're going to get better candidates. You're going to be talking to people that are more interesting and also more interested in what you're trying to do. So that will ease the process a little bit. The next one is a little bit tricky, but the best candidate should be the most skilled candidate. And people will be inclined to think that's true, and I would say not always. So steps to reproduce. Hire the most skilled candidate you have interviewed. Find out they're extremely difficult to work with. Or worse, see them quit after 3 months. I've seen it happen before. It's not really nice, and it's a waste of money. So think about how many hours you spend interviewing people. That's a cost to your company. You're paying salaries for people to be on interviews that will go nowhere. It's like some candidates can cost thousands of euros to be hired. You should always be mindful of that. So, propose fixes. Understand the candidate's motivation and values, right? Find out why they're applying to your company. So why do they want to change jobs if they currently have a job and are coming into something new? What is it that they don't have on their current place that they're looking to find at your company? Assess relevant industry experience. So are they someone that's been on that same industry as your company for a long time? Are they looking for a change of industry? Is that change relevant to you? Does it make sense? And also ensure they align with your company values. You probably noticed that I mentioned this quite a lot. Values, some people think they are a little bit wishy-washy, but I think it's important to have them clearly defined, because if your messaging is consistent and you know what you want, there's a very good chance that other people will also be able to stand behind you when you're doing the work and when you're making things and putting things out there in the world. So a few ways to do that, I would say, is culture fit interviews, really helpful, but also having leaders in the company, so C-suite or founders, depending on the size of the company, this may or may not be more or less feasible, but having high-level people in the company talking to candidates before you make a decision to hire them will help, one, show the candidate that you care about them joining the team, but also allowing decision makers in your company to get at least a vibe check, but also potentially vet some of the choices that you're making there that could be and hopefully should be long-term. The next one, it's not necessarily a bug, more of a feature, but I guess as a developer, I felt inclined to add something that is not a bug, but a feature here. And assessing candidate skills. So steps to reproduce. See a long list of skills on the candidate's resume. Not really sure what, if the candidate has those skills and how can I verify those. One thing that I think, I don't know if many people have tried this in the past, but automated assessments are fairly good. And again, with AI, these are getting even better. So there's many platforms nowadays that are fairly cost effective and will allow you to create, or even they'll come with templates for the things that you want to test for. So this will be your tech stack, the level of engineer you're trying to hire. So if it's a senior, we'll ask the relevant questions that you would expect a senior to know. If it's a junior or mid, perhaps the test will be more about implementation details or like just technical knowledge. Consider looking at the candidates' contributions in real-life projects. This will definitely tell you, their technical ability, but also how they approach implementation. And alongside that, ask the candidate to walk you through like past solutions to these projects, or ask them to show or talk about something that they implemented that was meaningful to them. This could be a big feature that perhaps was really foundational in a previous position that they held, or it could be a smaller feature, but that had an interesting or complicated aspect to it that they had to think really hard about how to solve. Also, perhaps look at collaborative projects to see how they work as part of a team and how they approach problem solving. Are they the kind of person that prefers to communicate with others and arrive at joint solutions, or are they the kind of independent thinker? That would kind of help you tailor as well if that person is a good fit for your company. And lastly, seek feedback from people that they may have worked with in the past. So references go a long way. You might think that, if you ask for a reference, they get to pick the reference. They will obviously pick someone that would say nice things about them. But I think in here it's important to look at, the in between the lines, I suppose, is what things are they highlighting about that person? Are those things the kind of details and abilities that you would like to see in the person that you're hiring? Now, I've been talking about the company side, so let's look a little bit at, as a candidate, how can you stand out, especially now, as it's been alluded to here, with AI and how jobs are changing, how can we build the perfect candidate? So starting with one user story, as a candidate, I'd like to cause a good first impression on my interview so that I can increase my chances of getting hired. Research about the company that you're applying for. So I have interviewed so many people across jobs that I had over the years that they come into the interview and they have no idea what we do. And that is a little bit disrespectful, but also quite deflating, because you now have to dig out conversation starters to try and get the person engaged with what you're doing. If they did their homework, it becomes a lot easier. So if you're the candidate and you're applying for a company, do a little bit of reading on what that company does. Another one that goes kind of without saying, be presentable and punctual. Like, you don't have to wear a suit. I would say probably don't wear a suit unless you really know what the kind of job you're applying for. But I don't know, like, just show yourself in a way that you feel comfortable and confident. I think that the level of confidence you present will talk a lot more about you and, you know, raise your chances of getting hired over not doing that. So the other thing is communicate honestly and clearly. I think it's very normal for us to feel nervous when, you know, going for a job interview. We don't really know what's happening there. This part, I would like to highlight that if you can, and you probably should be able to, tell the company, you know, when you join an interview and if you're feeling a little bit nervous, just say, you know, oh, I'm just, you know, feeling a little bit nervous here. Can I take a moment to think about my answer? Don't rush into things, like breathe, stop, you know, keep yourself in control. The other thing is prepare for common questions. You know what interviews are usually like. Just have these questions written down and what your answers are so you don't have to think about it too hard. Like post-it notes, especially if you're doing a remote interview, if you're on Zoom, post-it notes around your monitor will really, really, really help. I've said this to a friend that applied to a big company recently, and she took a photo of her, like from her perspective, what the interview looked like before it started, and she had a number of notes, and she ended up getting the job. So I don't know if it was because of that, but it must have helped. The other thing, I guess, is confirm next steps. So when you apply for an interview, you want to know what comes after. So always try and check with people, what should you expect, what kind of timelines, when will they come back to you? Ask those basic questions. The next point is, as a developer, and notice not as a candidate, I would like to find companies that align with my values so that I can be proud of being part of their team. So again, coming back to the importance of values, but research companies that you like. So if there are apps that you use often, try and see if they're hiring. You know, do they look for people that have your set of skills? Try and find these companies. Or perhaps it's not a company that you use their service, but they just do cool stuff and you just keep track of them. That's a really good thing and will allow you to build up a sort of list of companies that perhaps you would like to work with. Try and connect with their team members. So, you know, a lot of people don't perhaps like LinkedIn as much, but there's other ways you can do it too. You know, through Discord, through Blue Sky, or if you still use Twitter. Try and connect with people that are part of that company to see what they're working on and to kind of create a little bit of an image of you so that they remember the name when your CV kind of comes through. Also, you can ask questions before you apply for a job. So if you're interested in the job but you're not very sure, you can try and message the company or message someone that works for that company to try and get more information about it. Don't waste your own time applying for jobs that you're unsure about, but also try and not waste other people's time applying for a job that you know you're going to reject anyway. Again, going back to the companies that you like, keep tabs on them. Follow them on social media, follow them on LinkedIn, so that when they start looking for people, you know that they're looking for people, and that might be a good motivation for you to perhaps, you know, change from a job that you're okay with but not loving to somewhere that you would like to be a bit more. That's a very valid reason, you know, to change jobs. But also, in case you're looking for a job, keep tabs on all the companies that you would like to apply for, so that when one of them has an opening, you're there. And I guess another way of saying it is dig the well before you're thirsty. You know, have those things in your hand so that when you need to use them, they're there. And next point is, as a candidate, I would like to be recognizable when applying for jobs so that I can inspire confidence in the companies looking to hire me. So this one, again, not everyone likes the idea, but I think I'll start with a basic recommendation. Keep your GitHub profile up to date, but also pin repos that you liked, you know, like to work with or that are meaningful to you on your GitHub homepage, so that when you highlight the things that you like to work with, companies that are looking for you will see that, and there's a higher chance that you're going to have a good alignment. So if you have 100 repositories, and many of us here will have on GitHub, it's very difficult for a company to know which one of those are relevant. Try and help them, right? Because hiring managers, recruiters are extremely overworked these days, so you want to make it as easy as possible for them to know whether or not you're a good fit. And usually you want to be seen as a good fit. consider having a blog, personal website, or creating some kind of content. You don't need to be posting new videos on TikTok every day about programming, but there is a balance, like, a couple of hours a week or even a month that you spend on your own personal website, writing a blog post about something interesting that you may have done over that month. That creates a history. And perhaps you only have one blog post now, but in 3 years, you will create a backlog, right? And that will help companies to see your trajectory. It's also very important to have a narrative when you're talking about yourself. That makes it a lot easier to reason about things. Another one that I guess is pretty obvious, try and speak at conferences or meetups. Here I am. There's a higher chance that if I ever apply to a job for anyone in here, you might remind me. And bonus point if you have blue hair, I guess, but that's entirely optional. And lastly, contribute to open source projects or just projects that will have an impact around you, so that these companies, again, right, when you apply for jobs, they will notice you there and your name will be attached to something positive. And then spend some time in relevant online communities. I mentioned the Geek Sessions Discord server here once. I'm going to mention it again. They're not sponsoring this talk, I guess. They're allowing me to talk in their conference, but it's a really cool place. We have a lot of discussions in there that are interesting. There's the local foundation Discord server as well. There's a dev.pt. There's many communities that you can be part of that will all help you find people that could eventually give you a job or a better job. And the last one, I guess, is as a candidate, or perhaps not the last one, but as a candidate, I would like to know the values of the company that I'm applying for, so that I can show my alignment with the company. So we talked about the company values. Now, as a candidate, how can you show yourself in a way that makes that compatibility easier to spot? So reflect on the main values that you would look for in a company before you apply for them. Have that written down. It's, it doesn't have to be something very comprehensive, but what would you like to have, when you go into a company to work every day? See if the companies that you're applying for showcase their values anywhere in social media websites or their online presence or offline presence as well. Ask for examples. So when you're interviewing or if you're talking to people that work for that company, ask for examples on how they embody such values, on their day-to-day work. Have examples of yourself, when did you embody those values? So as I said, empathy, your ability to communicate with external clients, have examples of when you did that or when you were pragmatic and chose the solution that was business-led instead of the one I wanted to do. Because as developers, I feel like very often we would love to craft the perfect code, but then deadlines get in the way and we just have to ship it. So, having examples of when you did the right thing in that aspect, for example, could really improve the way a company will look at you as a candidate. And then consider the company's missions as well and how they align with your career goals. This one is very important. I feel like nowadays, as developers, we spend very little time in our current jobs. So on average, 3 years is like a whole career for a developer in a company. Every 3 to 5 years, people are swapping jobs. And that's okay. I'm not here to say, it's too much or too little, to each their own. But if we're moving jobs so often, it's important to know where we are in our career so that when we join that next company, we know where we will be in 3 to 5 years' time when we're perhaps looking to leave to the next place. LinkedIn does something really interesting, not the platform, but the company, which is called a tour of duty. And that's from the company side. But when you join them, they started it. Other companies do that now. But when you join them, they would ask you, what do you want to do after us? After you leave here, what do you want to do next? And if you know the answer to that, it will really help you even before you start with that company. And I guess now, lastly, as a candidate, I would like to understand the interview process so that I can be prepared for anything that a company would like me to showcase. So I guess we started on basics. We're going back to basics. Understand the company's interview process. As a company, I guess this is a tip. If you have an open interview process somewhere in your hiring pages, that's really, really helpful. But as a candidate, you can ask, how many interviews do I have to apply or be part of? Is there a technical assessment? Is there a technical interview? Is there a whiteboard interview? Find out what those things are, what's involved, so that you can be prepared. Ask for examples of what they would like to see in the interview. So as I said, if you have a whiteboard assessment, try and get more information about that so that perhaps you can study a little bit ahead of time. I don't know if I would do very well on a whiteboard interview. I think no one would. Personally, I don't like those kinds of interviews, but if that's necessary, try and find out ahead of time so that you can, just be your best version when it comes to it. Prepare examples of your work that showcase your skills. So, I mentioned this a few times throughout this talk, and I'll mention it again. Have these things ready so that it's very easy for you to talk about. Again, have a list, post-it notes, whatever it is, so that when a company says, oh, a time where you implemented something to do with performance or scalability, you have that example ready, you can talk about it with confidence, they know you talking about something that you're an expert, so prepare. And I guess on the subject of being prepared, be prepared to talk about real challenges that you faced as well. And, related to that, examples where you face difficulties. Sometimes, we don't like to talk about failures, but depending on the type of company you're applying for and how the interview process works, and the person that is interviewing you, talking about a time when perhaps the outcome wasn't the most positive, but that you managed to turn that into a lesson learned, perhaps for yourself or for the company, would really, really highlight a lot of your ability to solve problems in an efficient way. So that is something that is also very, very important. And I think if you can fit that in when you're talking to a company and trying to get a job, it's very important. And last, ensure that you speak about yourself both as an individual, but also what you do when you're part of a team. I said to not use cliche terms on the job posting, but as a candidate, it's important to highlight what values that you bring to other people that work with you. What kind of team member are you? Try and make that clear so that other people know what to expect when you join them in the office or even virtually, on your first day and 3 months later and so on. That's it. I talked a lot, no stop. This was a lot of information all at once, but thank you. Thank you for listening. Any questions from anyone? I can probably put this down now so I can see the people here as well. I'm sorry. I'm not very tall and, but okay, so we got one question over there. I should have brought my footstool. I'll keep that in mind for next time. Yeah. Sorry.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I was just wondering if you have any specific advice for entry-level candidates.
Ooh, okay, we're going there. I used to, before, we had AI that could code things that people that started coding 3 months ago would be struggling to do. I think that right now is a very complicated time for being a junior developer. Being completely frank, it kind of sucks to try and get into the industry right now. But I think this is sort of a transition period because companies will very soon, and this was highlighted in the keynote, companies will very soon realize that we can't have senior engineers if we don't train juniors and mids to become senior engineers. So somehow as an industry, we're going to have to figure that out. I would say that right now, if I was starting, my main focus would be to learn how to work with AI. Because the basics of coding, perhaps you don't need to know that, but you still need to know foundations. You still need to know design patterns. You still need to know, complex problems. Even if you don't have years of experience, knowing what those things are will probably help you get pretty far with the help of the AI that can copy TypeScript code that's been on the internet that some other AI model stole from somewhere. Use that. Learn to work with AI if you're starting now. Okay. Because we're all doing that. We're all having to learn that, by the way, even if you're a senior. So I hope that answers the question. I don't have a magic solution, but any more questions? There's one over here. What do you just wait for the microphone? Sorry. Go.
You've said it a few minutes ago, but I don't really know what were you talking about. What's an whiteboard interview?
So sometimes companies, when interviews were held in person, you would come into an office and they would have a whiteboard. The color of the board is not really important, but most of them would be white. But they would have a whiteboard and they would ask you to write either a known algorithm. So binary tree sorting is a very famous example that you get, but also how would you implement like Fibonacci sequence in the language that you're applying for that job. So in Java, how would you go about writing a little Fibonacci calculator thing? And you would have to write that on the whiteboard, like no devices to help you, just from memory, your knowledge of that language. That's what they are. And as I said, I don't think they're very helpful because we don't code without the internet. You know, like no one writes code without Stack Overflow. We never have. Nowadays, we just ask Copilot to go and get the Stack Overflow answer for us. So that's what it is.
Okay. Do you think like certifications for maybe entry-level engineers are go like a long way for us?
I think it would probably depend on the area that you're applying for, more specifically. Again, I'm not a hiring expert, so take this as like empirical. But if you're applying for things perhaps like infrastructure engineering, that having certificates on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform could help you. But if you're doing web development, for example, saying that you completed a tutorial on Treehouse probably won't go as far. So it would depend on the area. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
We got another one on the back there. So,
hey, so also coming from both sides, having been hired and having hired a lot, there were a few questions around entry-level engineers. What's your opinion on niche languages and niche frameworks as a leg up for?
I would say probably try and do that. Again, completely empirical, you know, caveat, not a lawyer, not a doctor. But my opinion on this is that niche languages are probably where we're going to see better paying jobs and probably more interesting opportunities as well. Because, and I'm sorry if I'm breaking anyone's heart in here, but like JavaScript developers are a dime a dozen. And I say this as someone that, you know, built their careers being a full stack TypeScript developer. Okay, and now I work with Rails. So, you know, I built my career on that language, and then I shifted to something that nowadays is also not as sexy when you come to languages. Like Ruby is not as popular as it used to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So I'd say niche languages are probably a good idea, or at least I want them to be a good idea because I want to learn them because they are interesting. So, yeah, do more questions, or are we out of time? I don't really know. Go on. It's going to be the annoying question, isn't it?
I don't know if it's on.
I'll admit I missed the first 10 minutes, so maybe you already talked about this. But in talking about like as a entry or whatever phase you are in your career, and this is more for the audience to know, but do you recommend different things depending on the company? Like you talked about culture, but the company, whether they're targeting enterprise or they're a startup or they're, you know, a small to medium, like would you approach the interview or the application process or your skill set differently as an engineer depending on the size of the company or where they're at in their kind of life cycle?
That is actually something that I did not speak about, but it's a very, very good point, and I would say absolutely. And I say that because I worked with games companies before. I work in a startup right now, and I worked with like companies that were more established, and they are very, very different ways of working. So I would say if you built your career on startups early stage, for example, you probably will struggle with a startup that is like halfway through their journey or like looking for an exit. So you don't even have to go like that far. It's all very, very different, and try and optimize. Again, that goes back to values, right? Like the kind of environment that you want to be day to day, that will dictate a lot. That'll be dictated a lot depending on what kind of clients that company serves. So enterprise serving is very, very different from like B2C. And like depending on how you want those challenges, I would say you should definitely approach the interviews different, but also like craft your skills in a different way. Like very fast-paced problem solving for early stage startups versus deep design pattern understanding for enterprise and government. You know, they're different things, they all have their value, but it takes a long time to learn either of those things. So I'd say kind of pick your lane. That would be my recommendation. Sorry, I think we're out of time now. So thank you very much.